Cursor is now forcing me to upgrade to the $60 per month subscription. Time to look for alternatives. What an a-hole move by Cursor. Just 12 days after announcing their unlimited plan, they changed the pricing back without notifying anyone. People were charged over $100 in usage, expecting unlimited requests. The F Cursor, what are you doing? I was paying $20 a month. I made 2 Claude Sonnet requests and one Opus request. Limit reached. I don't know if I should cry or laugh. Canceled my subscription directly. Oh boy. We have a lot to dive into here, don't we? This feels like the first major drama for Cursor. It's been a super successful editor for quite a bit now. I was skeptical of it at first and slowly fell so in love with it that I ended up investing in the company, so know that you should account for some bias here. All of that said, this is a bit of a mess. I have a lot of thoughts, both about things Cursor did wrong and also about things the community is struggling to understand. And most importantly, this kind of seems like the start of a change in how AI services are priced. We're moving away from loss leaders into more realistic pricing, and that's going to screw a lot of people. And oh boy, there's a lot to dive into here. As you guys know, none of these companies are paying me to talk about this stuff, and I want to do my best to give you my honest, neutral, unbiased take. So a quick word from an unrelated sponsor, and then we'll dive in. I don't know about you guys, but my teams have been shipping way more code lately, and that means we've been spending way more time doing code reviews, and I've been getting incredibly frustrated with GitHub. That's why today's sponsor, Graphite, makes life so much easier. Seriously, the more time I spend in this dashboard, the happier I am. It's just like if code review was rethought from the ground up as a good experience that was core to things instead of GitHub where it was kind of bolted on, which you can absolutely feel as you use it. I could sit here forever just telling you about all the nice hotkeys to switch views, the ways you can jump around things, how much better the performance is when you look around. But honestly, the main reason to use them right now is Diamond. It's gotten so good. I'm running Graphite on all the open source stuff we do for the channel now, and it's already been super helpful. Here are some real PRs that it's running on for Unduck, my search engine. And here it's catching the types of mistakes that we all make and end up waiting for our team to find for us. It's so nice having a tool like Diamond catch when you accidentally leave class names in twice. It's just the type of silly mistake we all make. It's fine. No shame in doing these types of things quickly when you're writing code. But why waste your time looking for these mistakes or making someone else on your team do it when AI can hop in and do it for you? You might think it's really expensive to run this code review constantly, but it's not. You get up to 100 pull requests a month for free. Why haven't you tried it yet? If you're interested in leveling up your code review game, check them out today at soydev.link/graphite. So what went wrong with Cursor? The TLDR, to put it as simply as possible, new pricing promised unlimited for $20, but people started getting billed for usage. There's a lot more layers to this, but this is the simply put way of explaining it. Previously, Cursor would give you 500 fast requests per month for $20 and unlimited slow requests, unlimited tab complete, and a couple other things that aren't as notable. But you would get however much tab complete you want, as well as more generations as long as you're okay with it being slower or using dumber models. But you get 500 requests on things like Claude 4 Sonnet, O3, and more reasonable middle tier models. Gemini 2.5 Pro, another one as well. You get 500 requests with those and unlimited for these other things too. They shifted their pricing, so instead of 500 fast requests, you get $20 of credit from the APIs, but also unlimited auto. If you're not using Cursor, I'll show you what I mean by auto. You have the agent mode, where you can switch between agent, ask, or manual, where you choose what gets touched where, as well as background, where it goes and runs in the background, similar to stuff like Devon. But you also have the model selector. You can pick max mode, which allows it to use more context and cost more money, but also auto mode, where it will pick a model based on performance and speed, and also probably price and the complexity of the task you're giving it. If you use auto mode, they can optimize costs on their end, so it's a lot cheaper for them, so they give you a lot more access there. But if you're picking a model like Claude 4 Sonnet, then it's going to cost money after you use it a certain amount. They were nowhere near clear enough when they announced the new pricing, and as such, a lot of people got burned, and we saw a ton of people getting these unexpected bills. It was nice enough to say in the UI here that you saved $80 on API model usage this month using Pro. You switch to auto, then you'll get unlimited requests, or you can set a spend limit in order to continue using Sonnet, so that if you want to keep using the model and you've overused it, then you can pay more money to keep doing it. So what happened? Because previously people would use it the entire month for the $20 tier and be fine, and now there are people who are hitting these limits in 1 to 2 days. There are a couple layers here that make this complex. First important thing, most Cursor users don't cost more than $20 a month in usage. The majority of Cursor users almost certainly aren't using these features heavily enough to cost Cursor that much money. As you guys know, I'm a pretty heavy Cursor user. It's the editor I use for everything I do. So if I go to my Cursor dashboard, you'll see, honestly, I haven't been coding too much the last few days. I have about 5,000 to 6,000 lines of agentic code writing, a bunch of tab accepts. I haven't coded at all for the last few days. I've been so busy with meetings and also playing the Skate early access. If I go to the 30-day window, you'll see a bit more. I do a lot of tab complete accepting and not as much agentic code, but I still do a bit, especially when I'm like in the middle of bursting out and coding a bunch of stuff. You get the idea though. My usage never gets far along enough that I am paying meaningful amounts in overage costs, unless I am playing around with expensive models like O3 Pro or Opus. But historically, I've never come close to the 500 requests that would cause me to go into the overage costs. So I was totally fine. With these changes, I'm still totally fine because my usage of the agentic mode is relatively minimal. But for a lot of people that live in agent mode, their usage is crazy, and as a result, they hit these new limits relatively quickly. We should break down what those limits are. Updates to Ultra and Pro pricing. In collaboration with the model providers, we're introducing a new $200 a month tier for power users. We're excited to roll out an option to purchase Ultra, a $200 a month plan with 20x more usage than Pro. While most users are served by the Pro plan, the $20 plan, there are some users that are power users that needed more. By default, the Pro plan will move from request limits to compute limits. All users will get at least $20 of model inference at API prices per month. Concurrent with this change, we're rolling out unlimited access to the auto models and lifting all limits on tool calls. Existing users can choose to stay with the 500 request limit method if they prefer. So what do they mean by the API prices? This is a thing I talk about a lot in my other content. Different models cost different amounts of money. I built a little app for comparison that's very out of date and I need to update it accordingly because O3 is a lot cheaper than this says because the price changed. I need to just throw it on GitHub and let people update it for me. But different models cost more or less money when you are using them. Not like per message, because AI isn't billed per message, it's billed per tokens in and out, usually in millions. So all this pricing is based on a million input and output tokens. We'll turn off these outliers. Something like Claude 4 Sonnet costs $3 per million tokens in and $15 per million tokens out. A token is a way of breaking up a request. This is also how the generation works. Usually it's 3 to 5 characters. It's like a syllable almost. And those syllables make up the thing that you're inputting or outputting. On something like T3 chat, most requests are relatively low on the amount of input and output tokens. If I go and say, hi, what's up? Or ask it a basic question about, I don't know, a JavaScript function, the amount of input tokens there is going to be relatively small. Like one sentence is probably 10 to 20 at most. Output tokens are much more expensive because that's the actual work the model is doing. It's the thing that it is generating. So for most models, you'll see a pretty significantly bumped output cost relative to the input. Like with Claude 4 Sonnet, $3 per million in, $15 per million out. So the more generation the model is doing, the more text it is outputting, the more your cost increases, and it increases very, very quickly. Just for reference, I'm okay with sharing our costs. Here are the costs for the last 9 days of T3 chat using Anthropic models. And here is our costs for all of June. It's not cheap. You can see here that our costs are about 50% input tokens and 50% output tokens. Sometimes it goes up a little bit, but a lot of our cost is to people sending long messages and using long histories. The other half is the output tokens. Before, like months before, when they didn't even have reasoning models yet, the split looked pretty different. Before the reasoning models were introduced, like they were here, you'll see that the vast majority of the cost was input tokens. The reason is because there were less tokens being output. When you turn on thinking for a model, it's generating way more output because it is thinking, which means generating. So when you use a thinking model, even if the price per token is exactly the same, your costs will go up a ton because you're outputting way more. That is a very, very important thing. Output costs went from about 1/4 to 1/5 of our cost to half or sometimes even more because these reasoning models will generate way more tokens. This is a big deal for something like Gemini 2.0 to 2.5 with the Flash models, where 2.0 Flash non-reasoning was super absurdly cheap, and 2.5 Flash with reasoning is up to 100 times more expensive, even though the costs per token are relatively similar. I hope this gives some context on the different types of token costs, because we'll be going deep into the details there. But we need to finish the overview of the drama first and foremost. So as I mentioned, on the $20 tier, you would get at least $20 of model inference at API prices. This means that if you had called the API directly, whatever the cost would be, that is what you're getting. That is what you would be paying, which is also technically the cost that they are paying at Cursor. They get a discount, but you'd be surprised how small those discounts are. We had an offer from Anthropic to do $20K a month minimum committed spend. So we would, like on a contract, guaranteed pay them at least $20,000 every month for 3 months. And we would get up to a 5% discount for that, which is just not much margin to work with and not worth the commitment. Because if it turns out we only need $18K in a given month, we have to pay them the 20 still, and we lose all the benefits of the discount. So you don't get much in terms of better pricing at scale. There are obviously at the scale of Cursor much better deals, but even then you're talking like maybe 20% probably at best. Like, these models cost a lot of money to run, and doesn't really matter who you are going to be spending that money somehow. Like, GPUs cost money, the electricity costs money, servers cost money. This all is expensive to do. Historically, it was much less expensive. Again, as you can see here, when 3.7 dropped with reasoning, our costs like 4x'd instantaneously for Anthropic models. The speed at which that increase happened was alarming to us. We had to make changes to T3 chat in order to not go under as a result of this introduction. And again, it was the same price, but the way usage changed and the way generation of outputs changed made it significantly more expensive for us. And this is just for a chat app, remember. This is just for people talking to an AI, asking it questions and getting answers. When you're also giving it a ton of tools, a ton of context through the code base and all these other things, the cost per message can go up a ton. And remember, Cursor used to charge per message. You got your 500 messages a month. It didn't matter if the message cost them 1 cent or $1. You got 500 of them. The thing that has changed is the average cost per message. If we look at this as like a function of like cost per message over time, they probably didn't have too high of costs per message initially. Let's say this starts at like 0, and we'll say the top tier, $2 per message. And this is meant to be average, not like the worst case message. We could P99 it or something, but I'm just trying to make the core point here. If previously the average message cost like 20 cents, maybe 10 cents, maybe 1 cent, we don't even really know. Over time, as these new models drop, the price increases, or they add tools, and then the price goes up more. When they picked 500 messages for $20 a month, they were around here. So if each message cost 10 cents, as you got up to 500 of them, then you would be costing $50 at worst case. But chances are the average is probably lower. It's probably closer to like 3 cents per message, which means the worst case, if you use all 500 messages, on average, you would cost 15 a month using all messages. 20 gives them some wiggle room. I'm sure the actual costs are very different from my estimating here. This is just a gut based on the numbers I've seen and played with stuff like Claude Code. The costs for this stuff are not as cheap as people seem to think. And a lot of the discounts we've been getting through all of these well-funded VC-backed companies just eating the cost has deluded us into thinking the stuff is a lot cheaper than it actually is. I see the numbers. I manage the books for T3 chat. It's not that cheap. That said, we're still doing a pretty good job making sure things fit within the $8 a month tier on T3 chat. So if you haven't tried T3 chat out yet, I'll give you a discount code. I just set up the promo code Good Value, which will give you the first month for just $1. So check it out if you haven't already. We put a lot of work into T3 chat. You get access to every model with generous limits. We're still billing per message, but that might have to change in the future as well because things are changing a ton. And yes, there are some other coupon codes in here too. So again, their price was picked when the cost per message was lower. At some point, we started to see more reasoning models, which drastically increased output costs. Then we got agent mode, which allows for a given message to do multiple things in one call, where it will check and rerun and do more, which generates even more output. And then we got more and more tool calling, which again would cause one message to do more different things. They added the max mode, which admittedly they call out here costs more because they're increasing the context window size. But all of these things drastically increased the cost per message. And that puts them in a hard spot. They can either fight to keep the cost per message low in order to make the price point reasonable, but now they're hurting the potential quality of what the tool can do. And other tools like Claude Code are more than happy to cost you 50 cents to $1 per message if they have to, because they don't care. That's just how they're built. But if Cursor can't do all of those things because they have a target for cost per message to hit, that sucks. So they don't want to limit themselves that way anymore. They wanted to make sure they could provide the best possible experience for you as the user without limiting how much each individual message costs. And ideally, over time, these costs will go down. When 2.5 Pro dropped, the average cost went down a little bit because 2.5 Pro is a slightly cheaper model. And also, they can probably get better deals from Google than they can through Anthropic. But honestly, 2.5 Pro is still quite expensive, so it probably wasn't as big a drop as you would hope. But over time, the hope is that more of these models will get cheaper and we'll see the price, instead of just constantly going up, maybe it will start to go down a bit, and then you'll get more. This is why they are changing the pricing to no longer be based on a number of messages, because the cost per message is going to keep changing over time. It will go up and down. It will change a bunch. And for some users, the average message will be much more expensive than for other users. Instead of limiting what the product can do in order to hit a cost target per message, they're instead choosing to charge you how much the messages actually cost. So I honestly believe a lot of the issue here is that people have never thought about or seen the actual cost of a given generation or task that they're doing. And now that they're seeing it, it's scary. Just for reference, I have a code base here that I was working in that is for the T3 Clonathon. I want to make some changes quick. Let's try out Claude for it. I'm using Claude Code here. And with Claude Code, it will tell you how much it actually costs to do the change. Update the gallery view to highlight the top 3 winners more clearly. Make sure all 3 have a badge indicating their position. And you can see how many tokens it is using throughout, creating to-dos. It's going to go find all the things it needs in order to make these changes. I'll let this run in auto mode as we are continuing to talk about everything else, but I just want you guys to get an idea of what a given message can cost using tools like this. Quick point of clarification, in agent mode, each new message in a loop counts as a separate one. So if you're doing something where it greps the code base to find a file and then does another step, each of those steps is a message. So you might only send 10 messages and get dinged for 50 messages if each one does 5 tool calls. That's how they break this up, because that's how the APIs work too, is once the tool call is completed, all of that context is fed back in to do the next generation. So agent stuff was built differently in that sense. But at the same time, the output token cost still went up a ton, and the amount of context going in for each of those tool calls increased input tokens a lot as well. So while the number of messages per message hasn't gone up on their end because you're paying for each of those additional messages, the amount of context each of those messages is ingesting and outputting has. The cost per message has still gone up a ton. I would be surprised if the average message cost hasn't gone up by at least 5x since they initially put out Cursor. I think that's an important thing to understand, is how much more expensive each message is now. Biggest thing by far, in my opinion, is using the term unlimited basically ever. There is no such thing as unlimited when it costs money to do. They call things unlimited, and there are things that are effectively unlimited, like the tab complete. I can't imagine an amount of tab complete where they will limit you unless you're actually abusing it or trying to turn Cursor into an API. Using the term unlimited does make people's brains fall out, though. I've learned this a bunch throughout building different services. If you call anything unlimited, people stop functioning properly, and it is quite frustrating to see. Referring to the $20 a month plan as having unlimited messages ever is bad. It's also worth noting that the term unlimited has dimensions, because there are different things you want to do in Cursor. The bottom dimension is obviously number of messages. And when people hear unlimited, they assume that means they could send as many messages as they want. But there's also number of options. Generally speaking, when I say something's unlimited, I mean the number of times you can do the thing, but most people assume it means more than that. It also means the number of options you have. Like if there's an all-you-can-eat buffet, it's unlimited food, you go and fill your plate and they say, oh no, that one thing at this table, you can only have a certain amount of that. These things are unlimited. you don't have unlimited everything. You have unlimited access to food, but you don't have unlimited access to each item that they're serving at this like all-you-can-eat buffet. The problem was that when people heard unlimited, they assumed unlimited all of the things. But what they actually meant was a limited set of options. The auto option was unlimited. And if you wanted other options, the number of messages you'd get would go down, not based on their arbitrary distinctions for how much it should be, based on the realistic costs for these things. On top of that, a lot of the comms they had were not great. That blog post we were checking before with the updates to pricing seems to be more so an announcement of the new pricing than it is a clarification on how the old pricing is changing, as well as the option to stay with the old request limit method that existed. This is kind of tucked in. And again, this is the updated version of the blog post. Here's the archived version. Honestly, not too different beyond this one paragraph. The original was that we're happy to report we're rolling out changes this week to make pro plans more generous. I would never have worded this way. It's not actually more generous for a large number of users. By default, the Pro plan will now follow an unlimited with rate limits model, and all limits on tool calls will be lifted. Existing users can choose to stay with the 500 request limit method if they prefer. That's not clear enough at all. They should absolutely have called out the at least $20 of model inference at API prices per month. Not great comms, not great follow-up, and not great clarity publicly. There is another big problem with their comms, which is that generally they still don't fully own them. Right now, Cursor News largely comes from people like me and other users covering it, as well as a handful of random one-off employees tweeting the things that they're working on. In a sense, this is cool because they're really just focused on building the editor and they let the community run itself. But it also means that when there is a failure or a mistake like there was here, they don't own enough of the communication loop to address it and fix it properly. And even if they did, they don't have the distribution channels to get the message out. They rely on people like me to do that. But this is where that really hurts, especially when I think there are mistakes here, because it's much more likely you hear about this through users than you do through Cursor. Generally speaking, they have not owned enough communication with users, but there is a really big thing that they missed here, in my opinion, that I pushed super hard when I was chatting with them about all this. Where the fuck is the visual in the dashboard for this? Why can I not go to the dashboard and see where my usage is at? I was corrected by chat. They do kind of have a visualizer, but it's nowhere near enough, in my opinion. I need graphs. In order to get to it, I had to go to usage and realize that this included usage summary is clickable. There is an arrow here, but that didn't indicate anything to me. You got to click it. By the way, it doesn't even do a clickable on the cursor by default. Okay, now it is, but it wasn't before. That's weird. And here you can see the different models and how much usage I've done. Right now, I'm at $22 of API cost, as in that's what it would cost them if they were paying the traditional rates, from June 21st to July 21st. I'm told I have at least $20 of usage. I'm actually over that already, and I haven't been coding that much. I'm still at $22. I don't know when I'll hit a limit, though. There is no transparency here whatsoever about how much more I can do before I hit a limit. This is not well communicated at all. I have no insight whatsoever about what point I'll get to where I will now be cut off or paying money. It just kind of happens in the UI. And while I do actually kind of like how they do that, where they'll tell you you've saved $87 on API model usage this month with Pro, there is still not enough transparency here. Also, you can tell from the buttons getting their text cut off that this was kind of thrown in last second. But the point stands. It's not clear enough at all. I didn't even know until I just found this dashboard that despite my less than heavy usage, I'm still costing them more than $20. There's some point where if I keep using it, I'm going to get limited, and I don't know when that is. That sucks. For comparison, here is T3 Chat's UI. You have your standard messages, and it tells you how many you have, and when your limit resets. For me, it's actually resetting tomorrow, just because that's when my sub goes off. You can even hover to get the exact timestamp for when that is, as well as the premium messages and purchase credits. We do need to change this because, again, message price-based billing doesn't work because sometimes the costs change drastically. But if we do change it, we need to make sure it's clear how much usage you have, when your usage resets, and how this all comes together. We can't just show you what the bill would be because that doesn't give you enough context about where you're at and where you're going and when you'll be limited. And right now, despite the fact that I'm an investor in Cursor and I talk with them a lot, I genuinely have no intuition whatsoever about what point I will have to start paying for my cursor usage. Call me biased all you want. I don't like this. I don't like the fact that I don't know when I'll hit a limit on a tool that's as useful to me as Cursor is. I use it as my main editor. I need to know when I will be charged more for using it, even if the amount is small. And that's another important distinction I want to make, that this isn't about being charged super large amounts of money. Most of us make a decent bit of money as developers. I don't mind like paying $100 a month for how I use Cursor. I don't even mind paying $1,000 for how much I'm using it. It's getting me a ton of value, but I want to know when I'll be billed and how much I'll be billed. And right now I don't. What's even worse is sometimes I will do a really big, heavy agentic generation where I tell Opus to go add a new piece to the UI or build a new route in Pages. And what ends up happening is sometimes it just comes out bad and I delete it. I'm still paying for all of that generation, even if I don't like the coded outputs. You don't pay for errors, but you do pay for successful generations, even if the thing that it generates isn't useful. Also, most people still just don't understand tokens. Like, we should be billing on tokens for T3 chat, but no one gets them. It's still a weird, unintuitive thing. It took me a while to better understand them myself. Figuring out how to explain these details is a problem in and of itself, much less visualize them and make sure users understand where they're at and what their costs look like. Speaking of which, let's check in over here. I haven't even checked to see what the code looks like for this yet. It's a relatively simple change. So let's see. Yeah, this is a very simple change. This is like 30 lines of code at most, like actually at most. Super simple UI change. That one message cost 50 cents of API costs. If I was doing this in Cursor and I got 500 of them for $20, that would cost $250 for them. That is horrifyingly expensive. The fact that this thing that used to cost maybe 3 cents per message now can cost 50 plus changes the trajectory and like way you have to think about these products on a fundamental level. And the way that they were structuring their billing doesn't work for the new things they want to add and to do. And this also isn't just using Claude Sonnet, by the way. Haiku, which is the much cheaper Claude model, is used for most of the like parsing and finding things in the generation of the large like input context side because it's cheaper and that's how Claude Code is built to work. But even then, even though it was largely just output generation here, 50 cents of cost almost. That's crazy. And the fact that we were getting 50 cents per message for 500 messages for $20 was a massive, generous thing that they were doing for us. In my recent video on the Gemini CLI, I go a bit more in depth on these numbers. Anthropic added a max plan where you get unlimited, effectively, Claude Code usage, where you're not billed on the API anymore, you're just paying a monthly subscription. You get 200 requests every 5 hours, up to 960 a day, up to 100,000 token input, and up to 8,000 token output. Just assuming you hit all of those, the 96 million input tokens a day and 8 million out is $288 for the input and $120 for the output per day. That's $408 times 30 days. Do you understand? To be clear, this is basically impossible to do because you're not going to be hitting each of these limits in every 5-hour window for the entire month. But even if you got half the limit for 15 days of the month, so 408 times 0.5 for the half times 15, that's still $3,000 of inference. That's crazy. You're paying $200 a month and getting $3,000 of inference. So how can Anthropic do that? A couple reasons. One, they have a shitload of money raised. They can eat the loss leader. It's okay for them to. Similar with Gemini, and as I showed before, Gemini's like potential daily costs, which by the way, they're still giving you for free. They're not charging for Gemini CLI at all, and the usage is absurdly generous. Because Google and Anthropic both have a bunch of money, so they can do things like that. Anthropic also knows most users won't get close to that usage. So the majority of users are probably going to use less than 80% of the $200, which means that that money can be used to offset the heaviest users. A lot of this game is how do you make sure the heaviest users are happy because they're the enthusiasts. They're the ones who will spread the good word of the thing you're building and get more users. But you need to make sure that they are both not too expensive and that there are enough normies costing way less overall to offset the cost of those power users. Like for T3 chat, we have users that cost us $50 to $80 a month still after all of our changes. When we had Gemini 2.5 Pro on the 1500 message standard tier, there were users who would cost us like $400 a month for $8. But there was few enough of them that the costs were offset by the $8 a month users, and we could still barely be profitable. Gemini 2.5 Pro was about to kill our profit margins, so we had to move it to the premium tier. But these are the things that we have to deal with as we structure our costs, and that's on an $8 tier. The $200 a month tier is a little more wiggle room there, but the extreme case is also way worse, where it can be thousands of dollars. But the biggest thing by far is that Anthropic sets the price. Every one of these tools other than Gemini CLI is using Anthropic's models because Sonnet and Opus are still by far the best models for tool calls. When you want to give a model the ability to run a grep command or find something in your code base or access something via MCP, OpenAI models are catching up, but Anthropic models are still the best at those things by far. As such, most of these tools, be it Cursor, Windsurf, OpenCode, Claude Code, basically all the things that we use, V0, Lovable, Bolt, Chef, they all have to rely on Anthropic models. And Anthropic, as I've mentioned, doesn't really budge on prices. Anthropic has their prices set, and nobody gets major discounts. Even clouds like GCP and AWS that have offerings for Claude have to charge API rates because that's the agreement that Anthropic has with those clouds. So if I'm using GCP or Bedrock on AWS to host Claude models, I'm still paying the same token costs. Anthropic sets the price, which means they can give themselves a better price. There's limits to this, obviously. Like GPUs cost money, servers cost money. Using those for things that your Anthropic Max subscribers are getting means you can't sell that same inference to somebody else at the same time. There is money they're losing by giving this to users for cheaper, but it's also theirs, they own it, and they can give it away way cheaper than others can because they have a fixed price they're charging. In fact, if we again think about this as how the most expensive users have to be offset by enough normies, Anthropic Max subscribers have to be offset by things like T3 chat, things like Cursor, and all these other places, because there is a markup they are charging there that is used to buffer the costs that they might incur through something like their way too generous Anthropic Max $200 a month plan. There's one really important key point I want to drive home, though. Gemini CLI is costing Google a lot of money. Claude Code / Max sub costs Anthropic a lot of money. And Cursor's $20 a month, 500 messages costs Cursor a lot of money. All of these things are loss leaders that are able to be funded because the companies have money. Gemini, being by Google, means they have Google money, and they want to win this so bad that they will gladly eat costs. They also have their own silicon that they're running their inference on, which means that their cost profile is a lot different from the other options, so makes sense that they can do things others can't. Also, Google money means they have a lot more budget to do these type of things. Claude Code is through Anthropic, who can offset costs, as I mentioned, by selling these things to other people. But more importantly, they have a shitload of money raised. They have a bunch of money in the bank. They can afford to eat this in order to assure their position in the space. I would also argue that Anthropic's a little bit salty because the Claude Code creators left to work at Cursor, and they are going to be a little harsher on the price gouging, as well as trying to price Cursor out of the market. I almost 100% believe what is kind of a conspiracy, but it just makes too much sense. It's weird that it would happen any other way, that Anthropic is squeezing Cursor a little harder right now out of saltiness. And part of why they put out this much more generous Max plan is to put more pressure on Cursor and make things harder for them because they don't want this other new company that's just building an editor, not making foundational models, to hurt their bottom line. And obviously, Cursor is in a similar boat. Previously, for $20 a month, their costs were actually probably not too bad, and they probably profited a decent bit. But costs are going up. These models are getting more expensive. They're doing more things per message. So what might have been a reasonable price before is now also a loss leader. All three of these things aren't making money on average. All three of these things at the top percentile of users are huge loss leaders for the businesses. And what matters most is that enough users aren't costing that much money, that it's profitable, or the long-term return they get from giving these things away for cheaper is good enough that it's worth losing some money now. This is a very common way of squeezing out other businesses in a space. Biggest example of this was the diapers.com Amazon drama. Diapers.com was a specialty retailer for baby products from 2005 to 2017. Amazon wanted to be the one shop for everything, and they didn't like these specialized sites that they were competing with. So they started a legendary price war where they were selling things at cost. If it cost them, I don't know, $20 to buy a pack of diapers to then sell to users, they would sell it for $15, taking a loss because they had enough money to do that, and they knew that Quidsi, the company that owned diapers.com, couldn't do it. They took advantage of the amount of money they had to push others that didn't have that budget out of the industry. And as soon as they got them screwed over enough, they acquired the company and then raised the prices back to where they should have been by default, the actual organic price. And this is the big problem here is the war to get users has forced these companies to charge way less than things actually cost, because they pay $20 a month to OpenAI and they get unlimited messages. They paid $20 a month to Cursor and they got 500 messages where they could do whatever they want with them. They pay $200 a month to Anthropic and then they can do literally anything they need to with Claude Code. There are a lot of other good analogies coming up in chat. It's like ride sharing in 2016, food delivery apps when they were popping out. All of these things are these companies using the money they've raised and the other things they have to arbitrarily lower the prices so they can win users in hopes that they can charge them the right amounts long term. When do they have to start charging, though? That's the important distinction. They have to start charging when their numbers are looking bad enough that it hurts their runway. If Cursor has raised a certain amount of money and they are spending a certain amount on all of the inference that they're giving away, like above costs, they need to figure out when to make the transition. And Cursor has a lot less wiggle room than Claude Code or Gemini have. This is kind of like a Survivor thing where whoever has the most money in the biggest war chest can last longer. And both Gemini and Claude have other ways to lower their prices because they own the inference and they can charge others for inference for other things. And if Claude Code wants to make the $200 tier more generous, they can charge Cursor more money in order to balance that out. And to be clear, none of this is meant to excuse the terrible communication and lack of clarity, visualization, and transparency on the Cursor side. At least $20 a month of inference at API prices per month. Not great. All of that said, they did post a response when the drama started to get out of hand on the 4th of July, really late. I saw people speculating that they posted this on the 4th of July at night because they wanted to hide the drama. I am 1000% confident that is not the case because I was talking with them as they were writing this. They had the whole team working late on a Friday, rushing to get this out as quickly as they could when the drama got to the point where they noticed it and were concerned because they don't know how to deal with drama. Most companies have never had any huge level of outrage towards them. It kind of sucks. Like the first time you've dealt with the thundering herd, it's a miserable thing to deal with. Most have never had to do it. And I don't think Cursor's ever had a big outrage event like this, and they had no idea how to deal with it. And they tried their best to, as quickly as possible, get this out. Don't read into when they posted it so much as just seeing that they went out of their way to get it out as soon as they felt like they had to. As soon as they saw the misunderstanding people had, they jumped in front. And I think the post is pretty good. Our recent pricing changes for individual plans were not communicated clearly, and we take full responsibility. We work hard to build tools you can trust, and these changes hurt that trust. Before we break down how the new pro pricing works, we want to make sure you know that we will refund any unexpected charges that you may have incurred for usage over the past 3 weeks. And here's the timeline. The original post with the changes being made to the Pro and Ultra plan, the version that didn't include the at least $20 of usage bit. June 30th, they updated it to include that bit. And then July 4th, they are following up because people were still very confused. In particular, there were people being billed for amounts that they didn't expect because it wasn't clear enough in the editor and in the UI. And these aren't edits. These are different posts. This is the original post that I shared before. This is the updated version, which I've already compared. And now on July 4th, we have the new post clarifying all of this and owning the mistakes. So how does the new Cursor Pro plan work? You get unlimited usage of tab as well as unlimited usage of models that are in auto, $20 of Frontier model usage per month at API pricing, as well as an option to purchase more Frontier model usage at cost. We previously described our included model usage as rate limits, which wasn't an intuitive way to describe the limit. It was a usage credit pool for the month. After you've exhausted your credit, we still give a short grace period beyond the credit pool. If you exceed your included usage and do not want to use models in auto, you can enable a spend limit. This allows you to pay for additional usage at cost. I talked to a lot of people, and a bunch of users of Cursor said they didn't even know this happened. It hasn't affected them. And almost every time they were using auto. If you're using auto, you're almost certainly fine. None of this matters. But if you're the type that likes to use the best and manually will select Sonnet or Opus or Gemini and turn on max mode and all those things, we are the people that are affected by this change. So why did they change? Cursor uses a combination of custom models as well as models from providers like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and XAI. Their custom models, to be fair, are mostly the Tab Complete model that they got from acquiring Supermaven, but that's an aside. For external models, we previously charged based on the number of requests made. There was a limit of 500 requests per month, with Sonnet models costing 2 requests. Because again, Sonnet models are expensive. New models can spend more tokens per request on longer horizon tasks. Though most users' costs have stayed fairly consistent, the hardest requests cost an order of magnitude more than the simple ones. API-based pricing is the best way to reflect that. Yes, if 90% of messages cost 3 cents and 1% of messages cost $2, you can't charge based on the number of messages anymore. We moved from request-based pricing to $20 of included usage on Pro. We also started to offer unlimited usage of models when auto is selected. Auto automatically routes to different frontier models based on capacity. Again, Cursor's doing enough inference that they're not being billed just on tokens anymore. They are renting out servers and farms with GPUs in them that have a certain amount of load that they're being hit with. And if they're being hit with too much load, it will offload that to more traditional providers like the official Anthropic endpoints using AWS Bedrock as well as GCP and all those things. But they try to default to their owned capacity that they are renting out from these server farms. That's why they had fast and slow before, because if you had fast on, they would just guarantee something can resolve it as quickly as possible. But if you didn't, then they would wait until their capacity had availability to finish your request. So again, the point here is that different messages cost different amounts, and the way Cursor structured their deals with these providers worked until the messages got to a certain amount of compute needed, cost incurred, and all of that, as well as them growing a ton over time. And they wanted to update the pricing to better reflect that. As they say, we were not clear that unlimited usage was only for auto and not all other models, which have at least $20 of included usage. I still hate the at least bit. Based on median token usage, the Pro plan currently covers about 225 Sonnet 4 requests, 550 Gemini requests, or 650 GPT 4.1 requests. And the vast majority of Pro users do not run out of their included usage. Not to keep harping on my usage, but 148 events. So I've done 148 messages in a wider window than this, because this one stops at the 21st. This one stops at the 10th. But assuming that this is all of them, that's 148 generations, the vast majority of which are with Claude 4. Occasionally I use 2.5 Pro or Opus, but Claude 4 Sonnet was the vast majority. At 148 messages, I'm still at over $20. So apparently I should be able to get 225. I'm off by almost 100, but I'm also not being charged yet. And I don't know when I will be. It's not clear enough, and that sucks. But I also understand why it's not clear enough, because it's not clear to them either. But they need to change that. They need to find a way to communicate this with people where people don't feel like they're being screwed, where they don't feel the uncertainty that even I feel right now, where I don't know when I'm going to start being charged. And then again, they own it, which I think is the most important thing. We missed the mark. We recognize that we didn't handle the pricing rollout well, and we're sorry. Our communication was not clear enough and came as a surprise to many of you. We're improving how we communicate future pricing changes. We're offering usage refunds for those with unexpected usage between June 16th and July 4th. Please contact Pro Pricing at Cursor if you have a surprise usage billing. The team will work as fast as possible to give you a full refund. What we're shipping next. We're committed to doing a better job with pricing updates going forward. That means advanced notices, clear documentation, and ensuring our team is prepared to support you through transitions. We're improving our pricing page documentation and adding additional visibility on the Cursor dashboard to see when you're approaching use limits. Expect more updates in the coming weeks. Cool, they're doing that. In many ways, I would argue it's too little too late. The idea of shipping this change before you ship the visualization for its effect on you as a user, really not great. Supposedly, everybody who's reached out has gotten refunds really quick. Design Gears here got refunded in about 20 minutes from sending the email. They're being pretty good about it overall. You get the idea, though. In a lot of ways, it is too little too late. And the thought of shipping something like this without also shipping the necessary visualization to see it is scary. And again, I'm near my limit that I don't know for sure with 140 messages. And previously, I could do 500 for the same price. And that feeling sucks. And I totally sympathize with people who are upset by this because this is upsetting. You were charged a lot less for a thing. You expected it. You relied on it. You built it into your workflow. And now that's gone. I do want to emphasize one last important thing, though. There is no free lunch. Anyone who thinks they can just move off of Cursor to something else to get the fair price that Cursor refuses to charge them doesn't understand how expensive this stuff is to do. Other options, if they are cheaper right now, that's a right now thing. I remember when Windsurf dropped and it was $10 a month, everyone freaked out. Like, why would you pay 20 for Cursor when Windsurf's only 10? Because Windsurf's limits are even more significant because they have to be because of how much money it costs to do this inference. I just did one run on Claude Code and the API costs alone, even though they were trying to use the cheaper models like Haiku, it was still 50 cents for one message. That's just what these cost. We were all getting a bit of a free lunch as costs were being subsidized by VCs and all these other things that were allowing it to be. But the subsidy era of AI generation is starting to shrink. These companies that are charging less than their costs can only do it for so long. And Cursor isn't even the first one to make these changes. We were one of the first to do it because we had to in order to make the $8 a month price work. But we're past the point where you can get $500 of something for $20, unless you're getting it from a frontier model company that is willing to eat the costs a bit longer. So if you're sitting here thinking, well, I'll just move to Claude Code because it's way better for $40 a month, just wait. Unless the models get way cheaper, you're going to be experiencing the exact same thing that Cursor users are dealing with right now. Well, Gemini CLI is free. I'm just going to use that instead. How long do you think it's going to stay free for? Let's be realistic here. Windsurf is still only $10 a month. If the OpenAI acquisition doesn't go through, that's going to change real quick. There is no free lunch. And even if some options seem like a much better value right now, as a combination of the frontier model companies being able to charge less for their own usage than for external usage, but more importantly, they're just doing that so they can win the users now, cause the other companies to bleed, and then raise the prices when they can. And all of that said, I like what Gabriel just pointed out in chat. The value that you can get out of things like Cursor and Claude Code or whatever else you're using is worth much more than the $20 or even $200 a month that you're paying for. I totally agree. I am getting way more value out of Cursor than $20 a month. That doesn't make these changes acceptable, but we have to be realistic. It's okay to believe two things that might seem contradictory. Like, Cursor is worth more than $20 a month for most users. This is, in my opinion, absolutely a true statement. The amount of value I'm getting out of Cursor is comparable to having another engineer that's pretty good on my team. For $20 a month, that's insanely generous. For $200 a month, that's still pretty damn generous. At the same time, Cursor's pricing changes caused unnecessary confusion and uncertainty for users. I believe both of these statements are true. Cursor charging more for usage, reflecting what you're using it for and how much things cost, makes sense because it's worth more than what I was paying. But at the same time, the way that they did this and communicated this and the uncertainty I now feel when I do a generation, the fact that I'm now hesitating to Command I and put something in here because I am worried about when I will hit this limit and when it will cost me money, that uncertainty and that hesitation I now feel to press Command I and do something here is bad. These can both be true things, and they are. The solution is way more transparency and clarity, and also, of course, a willingness to eat costs at the extremes in order to balance things out. I would make the argument that Cursor went a little too hard to target that like P99 user. Cursor looked at their numbers, they saw these 1% users, like the absolute, probably 0.1%, the hardest core users, doing hundreds of dollars of inference for $20 a month, and they rebuilt their pricing to make sure nobody can cost them that much money. And I understand the urge to do that, but realistically speaking, in almost any space, you have to be willing to let the top percentile be at cost because they're also bringing you a huge benefit. They're bringing a bunch of users with them. The die-hard lunatics doing hundreds of generations a day in Cursor are also the ones who are posting on Twitter about how cool it is and telling all their coworkers and friends about it and getting more people into the ecosystem. And the majority of who they bring isn't going to cost hundreds of dollars a month. But now those users, that top 1%, those hardest core diehards, they don't feel taken care of anymore. And all these other companies the Windsurfs and the Geminis and the Claude Codes of the world are willing to eat the cost because winning those enthusiasts means a lot of other people will follow. And my fear here, and the concern I have, and I've already seen this, is there are lots of users who will not hit the limit on the $20 tier that are now concerned because these top tier users, these hardest core people, are hitting the limits and they're sharing it. And since they're the trusted sources, those same people are going to follow those trusted sources where they go. So if you follow somebody who's talking about Cursor a lot and you learn a lot through them, and they say, I can't use Cursor anymore, I'm being billed more than it was supposed to be, I'm switching to Claude Code because it's a good value. You might not be at the $20 a month usage tier, but you'll see them, you trust that source, and you follow them there. This is a huge existential risk to the business of Cursor that they have to be considerate of. We are the same way with T3 chat. I expect our top 1% of users to always cost us money. We need to make sure it's not too much money that we are going to put ourselves out of business. Like if the top 1% who are paying $8 a month cost us $50 a month, that gets offset pretty quickly depending on like at what point in your curve, like what percentile do users start costing money and how much do they cost in that percentile? You have to do this math out. You have to know how many users cost more than you're charging them and how much more are they costing and balancing this out on all sides. One of the ways to do this is higher price tiers, which they did. Get those 1% users a higher tier that fits within their usage and still let them go over it. A $200 a month Cursor sub should be able to spend a lot more than $200 of inference because those are the enthusiasts that you want to have plugging your shit. So as long as you make sure those users don't go way too over and they bring enough users to offset it, we're good. But as somebody has pointed out in chat, this is their problem, not ours. I totally agree. This isn't meant to be me telling you what you as a user should do. This is me telling Cursor what they should do and how they need to think about this in order to not lose the diehards and then lose all of the other users they bring with them. You have to serve these 1% users, and you have to be willing to eat cost for them in order to long-term win. That said, you shouldn't be eating cost for the top 50% users, or in the case of Gemini, the top 100% of users. Literally every Gemini CLI user is at cost because it's free right now. Cursor can't do that, and they shouldn't do that, but those top users should feel taken care of so they can show every other potential user why they should show up. And the case in point, Locked In Coded in chat here, is at $3,000 of Claude Code usage in 14 days on the $200 tier in order to make sure that enthusiasts like him are happy with the value that they're getting so they will tell others to join. It's all complex math and balancing. And previously, Cursor was fine because the cost per message was low. Now that the cost per message has gone up a bunch, their numbers weren't looking as good, and they made changes accordingly, didn't communicate it well, and now I'm here doing a video talking shit on Cursor. Those are the consequences of getting these things wrong. And I'm not here to say it's easy. This stuff sucks. We have been talking about how to change pricing for T3 chat basically since we dropped T3 chat, and we're starting to get close-ish. I'm honestly thankful Cursor screwed this up as badly as they did because I got to learn a lot about how we're going to make similar changes in T3 chat. And even though I'm an investor and the success of my investment is probably going down as a result of this, like the likelihood I get to have a good exit is lessened by this failure, it benefits me and my business greatly, and at the very least, I get to make some content out of it too. I hope you understand the complexity of these things, and it's not as simple as Cursor bad trying to make more money. This is way deeper and way more complex than that. This is Cursor trying to survive in the world while bringing a great service to users and raising a ton of money and building the best way to write code. If anything, I'm impressed. This is the first big fumble they've had. But it is a massive, unforgivable fumble, and we should all hold them accountable for the mistakes they made here, both so that they don't make them, and so the whole industry knows it's not okay to do anything that feels like a rug pull at this level. That's all I got to say on this. Curious how you feel about my coverage here. I went out of my way to be as reasonable and neutral as I could. I know I have my biases, but I'm trying to give you the perspective as somebody who builds services like this with AI and cover the pieces that I feel like people are missing about where these costs came from. Curious how you guys feel. Let me know in the comments. And until next time, peace, nerds.